never should have questioned the paperwork, but when you dig the same grave 4 times in 6 months, you start to notice things. My name is Lou Santos, and I have worked as a gravedigger at Mercy Fields Cemetery in Bakersfield, California for 17 years. In that time, I've buried over 3,000 people. Most of them stay buried, most of them. Row 47, Plot C, sits in the Potter's Field section, about 200 yards past the chapel, where the grass turns thin and the headstones disappear. We don't talk about Potter's Field much. Indigent burials, county cases, people with no family, no money, no one to remember them. The work is the same: 6 feet down, plain pine casket, fill it back up. I've done it so many times I could do it in my sleep. The first time I dug row 47, plot C, was in March. Standard county burial, male, mid-50s, unidentified. The paperwork came through. I excavated the plot. We lowered the casket at dawn with just me and the county chaplain present. I filled it in, tamped the soil, marked it in my log. Done. 2 months later, I got the work order again, row 47, plot C. I figured it was a clerical error, brought it to the office. They checked the records, different case number, different name, legitimate burial scheduled for that plot. I told them I'd already buried someone there. They showed me the plot map. Empty, scheduled for new interment. I went back out with my supervisor. We checked the plot. The ground was level, undisturbed, grass starting to grow back in. No sign anyone had ever been buried there. My supervisor shrugged. Maybe you marked it wrong in your log, Lou. It happens. I knew I hadn't, but I dug it anyway. Female, early 30s, overdose victim. We buried her at sunrise. I filled the grave, tamped it down, updated my log with the date and both case numbers just to cover myself. I even took a photo of the finished plot on my phone. Something about it bothered me. Third time was September. Same plot. I didn't even bother going to the office. I just took the work order, grabbed my equipment, and walked out to row 47. The ground looked untouched, no subsidence, no settling, nothing to indicate 2 bodies had been buried there in the last 6 months. I checked my phone. The photo from May showed fresh turned soil, a small divot where the casket had settled. The ground in front of me was perfectly flat. I dug anyway, hit nothing but clay and rock. 6 feet down, clean hole, no casket, no bones, no evidence anyone had ever been there. The burial went ahead as scheduled. Elderly male, no next of kin. We lowered him in. I filled it, marked my log for the third time. I started checking that plot every week. I'd walk out during my lunch break, stand at the edge of row 47, and stare at plot C. The ground never changed, never sank, never showed any sign of the dead beneath it. I asked Eddie, one of the other diggers, if he'd ever had a plot that wouldn't stay filled. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. The fourth work order came in January. Row 47, plot C. I didn't tell anyone. I just took my shovel and went out before dawn, alone. I wanted to see it for myself, wanted to know what was happening to those bodies. The ground was frozen at the surface, but it broke easily once I got through the first few inches. Too easily. I dug slow, methodical, waiting for the crunch of wood, the smell of decay, some evidence of what I'd buried. At 4 feet down, my shovel hit something solid. Not a casket. Wrong shape. I cleared the soil carefully, using my hands near the end, metal, a casket handle, but it was facing down. I dug around it, widening the hole. The casket was vertical, buried standing upright, lid pointing toward the bottom of the grave. I cleared more dirt, found another handle, 2 feet below the first. Another casket, also vertical, also facing down. I kept digging, 3 caskets total, stacked one on top of the other like cordwood, all of them inverted, all of them in the exact space where I'd buried them, horizontally. I could see the county tags still zip-tied to the handles. March, May, September, all 3. I didn't open them, I didn't touch them. I climbed out of that hole and sat on the edge, staring down at what shouldn't be possible. The sun was coming up, orange light spilling across the headstones. I could hear the chapel bells ringing for early mass. The fourth burial was scheduled for 8 that morning. County case, female, mid-20s, no identification. I should have called my supervisor, should have stopped the whole thing. But I didn't. I filled the hole back in, covered those 3 vertical caskets with 6 feet of soil, smoothed it flat. When the funeral crew arrived, I helped them lower the 4th casket into the same plot I'd just refilled. We buried her horizontal, the way you're supposed to bury people. I filled it in again, tamped the soil, marked my log. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't checked row 47 since then. Haven't walked past it. Haven't looked at the work orders for Potter's Field. But I know what I'll find when the 5th burial gets scheduled. I know they'll all be there, waiting in the dark, stacked and inverted and wrong, and I know I'll dig it anyway. The first time I heard it, I thought it was the highway. My name is Iris Okafor, and I have worked as the head groundskeeper at Greenmont Cemetery in Portland, Oregon for 12 years. I know every sound this place makes. The creak of the iron gates at dawn, the way wind moves through the old oak section, the distant hum of traffic on Interstate 84. I know the difference between settling earth and shifting foundations. I know when something is wrong. It started during the October rains. We get heavy rainfall here, the kind that turns the cemetery roads to mud and makes the newer graves sink a few inches as the soil compacts. Normal maintenance. I was walking the grounds after a 3-day storm, checking for subsidence, making notes of which plots would need additional fill dirt. The mass grave section sits at the lowest point of the property, a flat expanse of unmarked grass where we've buried indigent cases since the cemetery opened in 1953. No headstones, no markers, just a small granite memorial near the access road that reads "Rest in Peace" with no names attached. I was checking the drainage near the memorial when I heard it. A low hum, not mechanical, not wind, something else. It rose from the ground itself, a sustained no that seemed to vibrate through my boots. I stood still, listening. The sound was faint, but constant, like a chord being held on an organ somewhere far away. After about 30 seconds, it stopped. I waited, silence, just rain pattering on my jacket and the gurgle of water running through the drainage ditches. I checked the area. The ground had settled unevenly near the center of the section, a slight depression about 15 feet wide. Not unusual after heavy rain, but the subsidence seemed too uniform, too circular. I marked it for fill work and moved on. The next time I heard it was during a night shift 2 weeks later. I was checking the irrigation system near the mausoleums when the sound started again. Louder this time, I walked toward it, following the hum across the dark grounds until I reached the mass grave section. The sound was definitely coming from below. Not one voice, many, dozens of voices, holding the same low note in perfect harmony. I stood at the edge of the depression. The ground had settled further. What had been a slight dip 2 weeks ago was now a noticeable bowl, at least 2 feet deep at the center. The grass around the edges had turned brown despite the wet weather. The humming continued for 2 minutes, then stopped. The silence afterward felt heavier than it should. I told Marcus, the night security guard, about it the next morning. He gave me a tired smile. Probably just the old sewer line running under that section. Grounds settling, pipes are vibrating. Happens all the time. I wanted to believe him, but I'd worked here long enough to know where the sewer lines ran. None of them went anywhere near the mass grave section. The subsidence got worse. Every week, the depression grew deeper and wider. I filled it 3 times with compacted soil. Each time, within days, the ground would settle again into the same circular bowl. The grass stopped growing entirely. The soil turned dark, almost black, and developed a smell like wet stone. The humming happened more frequently. I started hearing it during my daily rounds. Always the same sustained note, always multiple voices blending together. I timed it once, 3 minutes and 40 seconds before it stopped. I tried to count the individual voices, but lost track after 20. During a December rainstorm, I went out with a long metal probe, the kind we use to check for unmarked graves before excavation. I wanted to see what was happening below the surface. The probe went down easy, much easier than it should have through compacted cemetery soil. At 6 feet, I hit something that felt like wood. I shifted the probe 2 feet to the left. Wood again. 3 feet to the right. Wood. I pulled the probe out, went home, didn't sleep. The next morning, I brought the cemetery's ground-penetrating radar equipment to the site. We normally use it to locate old graves that have lost their markers. I ran it across the entire depression. The readout showed a mass of objects clustered together about 8 feet down, all of them tilted at the same angle, roughly 30 degrees from vertical. The positioning was wrong. Bodies in mass graves are buried in neat rows, horizontal, evenly spaced. This looked like everything below had shifted, rotating slowly around a central point. I checked the burial records. Between 1953 and 1987, we'd interred 214 people in that section. The records showed standard horizontal burials in organized rows, no notes about unusual soil conditions, no mentions of problems, but the ground penetrating radar showed them moving. The humming happened that night during my final rounds. I stood at the edge of the depression and listened. The sound was fuller now, richer, more voices joining. I could hear variations in pitch, like harmonics layering over the fundamental note. It reminded me of a choir, all singing the same tone, but with subtle individual differences. The ground beneath my feet vibrated, not much, just a faint tremor that ran up through my boots. I stepped back. The depression had grown again. It was now almost 30 feet wide and nearly 4 feet deep at the center. The edges sloped gently inward, creating a perfect bowl. In the center, the soil had compressed so much it looked glazed, almost ceramic. The humming built in volume. I could feel it in my chest now, resonating in my ribs. The note sustained, held longer than before. 4 minutes, 5. The vibration in the ground intensified. Then, slowly, the soil at the bottom of the depression began to shift, not settling, rotating, moving in a slow, clockwise spiral like water circling a drain. The humming reached a crescendo, every voice below singing the same perfect note. And then, at exactly 4:47 in the morning, it stopped. The ground stopped moving. The depression was 6 inches deeper. I don't work night shifts anymore. I've asked to be reassigned away from the mass grave section entirely. They denied the request. Not enough staff. So I go out there every day, check the subsidence, fill it when I can, and measure how much deeper it gets each week. Last Tuesday, I heard my name in the humming, not called out, woven in, part of the harmony. I didn't tell anyone. I just keep filling the hole. The human body burns down to about 5 pounds of ash and bone fragments, give or take a pound, depending on size and bone density. My name is Hank Voss, and I have worked as a crematory technician at Riverside Memorial in Sacramento, California, for 9 years. I know the mathematics of cremation. I know that a 160-pound person produces roughly 4 to 6 pounds of cremated remains. I know the variables: age, bone density, time in the retort, temperature consistency. I know the numbers. The numbers stopped making sense in August. We handle a lot of county cases, indigent cremations, people who die alone with no family, no estate, no one to claim them. The county pays for basic cremation, we process them, and the remains go into temporary storage until the county decides what to do with them. Usually they end up in a mass burial at one of the potter's fields. Standard procedure. I've done hundreds of them. The first discrepancy was subtle. A county case, male, mid-40s, estimated weight 150 pounds based on the transport documents. I ran the cremation at standard temperature, standard time. When I processed the remains, the scale read 14 pounds. I assumed I'd made an error. Maybe I hadn't cleaned out all the ash from the previous cremation. Maybe the scale needed calibration. I reweighed the remains on a different scale. 14.2 pounds. 3 times the expected amount. I checked for foreign objects. Sometimes people are cremated with medical implants or jewelry that wasn't removed. Nothing, just bone fragments and ash. I processed them through the pulverizer, poured them into a temporary urn, labeled it, and moved on. Probably just a clerical error on the estimated weight. Maybe the guy had been bigger than they thought. The second case was 2 weeks later. Female, late 60s, estimated weight 120 pounds. The cremation ran normally. Temperature held steady. Timing was exact. When I swept the remains from the retort, I knew before weighing that something was wrong. There was too much material. The collection tray was nearly full, 16 pounds. I checked everything, inspected the retort for debris, verified the identification tag, reread the cremation authorization. Everything matched, but the scale didn't lie. 16 pounds from a person who should have produced maybe 4. I started keeping detailed logs. Every county cremation that came through, I documented the estimated body weight, the actual cremation parameters, and the final weight of the remains. Over the next 6 weeks, I processed 11 indigent cases. 9 of them produced normal amounts of ash. 2 of them didn't. Male, early 50s, 140 pounds. Final ash weight, 15.7 pounds. Female, mid-30s, 110 pounds. Final ash weight, 17.1 pounds. I couldn't find a pattern. Different ages, different estimated weights, different dates of death. The only connection was that they were all county cases, all unclaimed, all headed for Potter's Field. I brought it to my supervisor in September, showed him the logs, the weight discrepancies. He looked at the numbers and shrugged. Maybe the county's estimating wrong. Maybe there's more tissue density than they're accounting for, as long as the cremation's complete and there's no foreign material, we're good. I wasn't good with it, but I kept working. The next discrepancy was the worst. Male, late 20s, estimated weight 130 pounds. The cremation ran for the standard 2.5 hours. When I opened the retort, the smell was wrong. Not burnt flesh. I'm used to that. This was different. Metallic, sharp, like ozone before a lightning strike. The remains filled the collection tray completely. I had to use a larger urn. The scale read 19.4 pounds. I processed the bone fragments through the pulverizer as usual. The grinding took twice as long as normal. The fragments were denser than they should have been. When I opened the pulverizer, the ash was darker than usual, almost black. I poured it into the urn, sealed it, labeled it with the county case number, and put it in temporary storage. That's when I found the note. It was inside the urn, folded paper, tucked between the plastic urn and the ash bag. I have no idea how it got there. The urn was sealed. I'd just opened it from the manufacturer's packaging, but there it was. The paper was clean, no ash, no residue, just 4 words written in pencil. We stay together. The handwriting was shaky, but clear. I turned the paper over. Nothing else. Just those 4 words. I stood in the crematory, holding that note, trying to understand how it could exist. The urn had been sealed. I'd just opened it. There was no way someone could have put a note inside, but I was holding it. The paper was real. I checked the other urns from the discrepancy cases, the ones that had weighed too much. I opened each one, carefully separating the ash bag from the container. 4 of them had notes. We stay together. Same words, same handwriting, same impossible presence inside sealed urns. I stopped weighing the county cases after that. I just process them, seal them, label them, and send them to storage. I don't check for discrepancies. I don't open the urns to look for notes. I run the cremations exactly as I'm supposed to, and I don't ask why questions. But I know they're still happening. I can tell by the weight of the urns when I move them to storage. Some of them are too heavy, much too heavy. The plastic creaks when I lift them, like they're carrying more than ash. Last week, I processed a county case. Female, early 40s, estimated weight 115 pounds. The cremation ran normally. I didn't weigh the remains. I just swept them into the collection tray, processed them, and sealed them in an urn. When I picked up the urn to move it to storage, it felt like it weighed 30 pounds. I didn't open it. I didn't check for a note. I just carried it to the storage room, placed it on the shelf next to the others, and walked away. There are 43 county urns in temporary storage now. 43 urns waiting for the county to decide where they'll be buried. I know which ones weigh too much. I can see them from across the room. They sit heavier on the shelf, like they're pressing down towards something below. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm running the last cremation of my shift, I hear a sound from the storage room, a soft shifting, like ash settling, like something redistributing its weight. I don't go in there anymore after dark. I just keep the door locked and try not to think about what's getting heavier. I've transported over 600 bodies in my career, and I can tell you that the dead all look different in their own way. My name is Mira Tan, and I have worked as a mortuary transport driver for County Medical Services in Chicago, Illinois, for 14 years. I pick up the unclaimed, the unidentified, the people who die alone in this city. I drive them from the morgue to whichever funeral home or crematory has the county contract that month. It's solitary work, quiet. Most nights it's just me, the van, and the body bag in the back. I'm good with faces. It's an odd skill for this job, but I've always been able to remember them. The shape of someone's nose, the way their cheekbones sit, the particular arrangement of features that makes each person distinct. Even in death, even after days in cold storage, I can look at a face and remember it. That's why I noticed when I picked up the same man 3 times in 1 month. The first transport was on a Tuesday night in November. County case from the morgue. Male, approximately 40 years old, found deceased in a shelter on the south side. No identification, no next of kin. The toe tag read, unknown male with a case number. Standard pickup. I loaded him into the van and drove him to Elmwood Funeral Home on the northwest side. They signed for him. I got my paperwork stamped. Done. The face stuck with me, though. Sharp jawline, a small scar through the left eyebrow, thin lips, Dark hair going gray at the temples, not remarkable exactly, but distinct. I remember thinking he looked like someone who'd had a hard life. 2 weeks later, I got another pickup, different case number, different location, this one from a hospital on the east side. But when I unzipped the body bag to verify the toe tag, I was looking at the same face, same sharp jawline, same scar through the left eyebrow, same gray temples. I checked the paperwork. Different name, John Smith instead of unknown. Different date of death, different circumstances. This one was listed as natural causes, found in a motel room. But the face was identical, not similar. Identical. I delivered him to Riverside Crematory on the south side. Different facility than the first transport. I didn't mention the resemblance. What would I say? That this body looked like one I'd transported 2 weeks ago? People can look alike. Coincidences happen, but I checked my logs that night, confirmed the dates, the case numbers, the facilities. 2 different bodies, 2 different destinations, same face. The third transport came 11 days later. County morgue called at 2 in the morning. Another unclaimed body. Male, mid-40s, found in a park. I drove to the morgue, signed the transfer forms, and wheeled the gurney to my van. The attendant helped me load the body bag. I didn't unzip it until I was alone in the back of the van. The same face, scar, jawline, gray temples, everything identical. I checked the toe tag. Different case number, different name, Michael Torres this time, different date of death, different location. But the clothing was the same as the first body, the same worn jacket, the same scuffed boots. My hands were shaking. I zipped the bag closed and checked the delivery address. Memorial Gardens, West Side, a third facility, 3 bodies, 3 locations, 3 different funeral homes. I delivered him, signed the paperwork, drove back to the depot in silence. The next morning, I called Elmwood Funeral Home, asked about the November body. They confirmed receipt, confirmed cremation, confirmed the ashes had been released to the county for Potter's Field burial. I called Riverside Crematory. Same story. Both bodies had been processed. Both had gone to Potter's Field. I called Memorial Gardens. The body I'd delivered at 3 that morning was scheduled for cremation that afternoon. 3 facilities, 3 confirmations, 3 different bodies with the same face in 3 different stages of processing. I started carrying a camera. Small one, fits in my pocket. The next time I transported a county case, I took a photo of the face before delivery, just to have proof, to have something concrete I could point to if this happened again. It happened again 2 days later. Different pickup location, a halfway house on the north side. Different case number, different name. But when I unzipped the bag, I recognized the face before I even saw the toe tag. Not the same man from the previous transports. Someone new, female, mid-30s, with a distinctive port wine birthmark across her left cheek. I delivered hers to Graceland Crematory on the east side. Photographed her face, logged everything. 3 days later, I picked her up again. Different case number, different clothing, same birthmark, same facial structure. Delivered to Oak Hill Funeral Home. 1 week later, same face, third pickup. delivered to Chapel of Rest on the south side. I called all three facilities. All three confirmed receipt. All three confirmed cremation or burial. All three had different case numbers, different dates, different paperwork. I stopped sleeping well, started checking my logs obsessively, started photographing every face, comparing them, looking for patterns. Over the next month, I found 4 more repeats. 4 more faces I transported multiple times to different facilities, each time with different documentation, each time supposedly a different person. The county morgue had no record of duplicate case numbers. The facilities all confirmed separate intakes. But I had the photos. I had proof that I was transporting the same faces over and over, sending them to different funeral homes, watching them get processed and cremated and buried in different potter's fields across the city. Last week, I picked up a county case from the central morgue. Middle-aged male, no identification. When I unzipped the body bag, I was looking at the first face again. The man from November with the scar and the gray temples. The toe tag had a different case number, a different name, David Chen. But the face was the same. I checked my records. This was the 4th time I'd transported him. 4 different names, 4 different facilities, 4 different case numbers. I delivered him to the same funeral home where I'd taken him the first time. Elmwood on the northwest side. The same attendant signed for him. I asked if they remembered the body from November. They checked their computer. No record. The case number I gave them didn't exist in their system. But I have the photos. I have my logs. I know what I've been transporting. I know that somewhere in this city, there are bodies that won't stay gone. Bodies that keep coming back through the system with different names and different stories, but the same faces. Bodies that get cremated and buried and somehow end up back at the morgue, waiting for me to pick them up again. I'm putting in for a transfer. Different department, different work. Anything that doesn't involve looking at faces anymore. But I know it won't matter. I'll still see them in crowds, on the street, the faces I've transported multiple times, walking around, going about their lives like they were never dead at all. And I'll wonder which version of them I'm seeing. The woman in the blue coat has been visiting Grave 12G for 8 months, but the plot has been empty for 9. My name is Jean Ruiz, and I have worked as the head caretaker at Holy Cross Cemetery in Queens, New York for 22 years. I know every grave in this place. I know the regulars, the widows who come every Sunday, the families who visit on birthdays, the ones who never miss a holiday. I know who belongs here and who doesn't. The woman doesn't belong. I first saw her on a Saturday morning in late April. I was trimming the hedges near section 12 when I noticed her walking across the lawn, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. She was elderly, maybe 75, wearing a dark blue coat despite the warm weather. She walked slowly, but with purpose, heading directly to plot 12G. I didn't think much of it at first. People visit graves all the time, but something made me watch her. Maybe it was the way she walked, too purposeful, like she knew exactly where she was going in a section with no headstones. Section 12 is our newer expansion area. Most of the plots are still empty, waiting for future burials. The few that are occupied have temporary markers. Plot 12G had nothing, just grass and a small survey stake marking the corners. The woman knelt at the edge of the empty plot and placed the lilies on the ground. She stayed there for about 5 minutes, head bowed like she was praying. Then she stood, brushed off her coat, and walked back the way she came. I watched her leave through the main gate. When I went to check the plot, the lilies were already wilting. Not just fading, wilting black, like they'd been burned. The petals had curled and turned the dark brown at the edges. I touched one. It crumbled into ash. I checked the burial records that afternoon. Plot 12G was scheduled for a burial the following week. County case, female, unidentified, unclaimed, standard Potter's Field service. But as of that Saturday, the plot was empty. No one buried there. No reason for anyone to visit. The woman came back the next Saturday. Same time, same blue coat, same white lilies. She walked directly to 12G, placed the flowers, knelt for 5 minutes, and left. I watched from a distance. When she was gone, I checked the flowers, black and withered within an hour. I tried to speak to her the third week. I positioned myself near section 12 and waited. When she arrived, I walked over, planning to ask who she was visiting. But as I got closer, she finished placing the flowers and stood to leave. I called out to her. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge me at all, just walked away at the same slow, steady pace. I followed her across the cemetery, calling after her. She reached the main gate and passed through. I was maybe 30 feet behind her. When I got to the gate, she was gone. Not walking down the street, not getting into a car, just gone. I looked both ways. The street was empty. She disappeared in the 15 seconds it took me to reach the gate. I started arriving earlier on Saturdays. I wanted to see where she came from. But no matter how early I got there, she was always already at the plot when I looked. I never saw her arrive. She was just there, kneeling with her lilies, and then she was gone. The burial for 12G happened in May. Unidentified female, mid-60s, found deceased in a subway station. No family, no next of kin. We buried her on a Tuesday morning, just me, the county chaplain, and the burial crew, standard service. We lowered the casket, filled the grave, placed a temporary marker with the county case number. That Saturday, the woman in the blue coat came back. Same routine, same flowers. But this time, she was visiting an occupied grave. I didn't try to speak to her. I just watched from the maintenance shed. She placed the lilies, knelt, prayed, and left. The flowers turned black. I checked the temporary marker after she was gone. The county case number was clearly visible. I made a note to cross-reference it with the morgue records, see if I could find a name, find out if this woman was actually connected to the deceased. But the next morning, the marker was missing. Not knocked over, not vandalized, gone. Like it had never been there. The ground was smooth, no evidence of the post hole where we'd placed it. I checked the burial log. The entry was still there, county case number date of burial, plot location, but the physical marker had vanished. The woman kept coming every Saturday. The lilies kept wilting black, and I kept finding things wrong with plot 12G. The grass grew in wrong, too fast in some places, dead in others. The ground settled unevenly, creating a shallow depression at one end. I filled it 3 times. It always came back. In July, I noticed the plot was shifting, not subsiding, moving. The corners marked by survey stakes were in different positions than they'd been when we did the burial. I measured it carefully. The entire grave had rotated roughly 15 degrees clockwise. The ground was still level. The grass looked normal, but the grave itself had moved. I stopped trying to maintain it. Let the grass grow wild. Let the ground settle however it wanted. The woman kept visiting. I started taking photos, documenting the flowers, the grave, the woman if I could catch her. But every photo came out wrong. The grave appeared as empty ground in every shot. No temporary marker, no settled soil, no indication anyone was buried there. And the woman never appeared in the frame. Even when I photographed her directly, the image showed only empty lawn. Last month, I was working late, finishing some hedge trimming near Section 8. The sun was setting. I saw the woman in the blue coat walking across the cemetery towards Section 12. I checked my watch. It was Thursday. She only came on Saturdays. I followed her at a distance. She walked directly to plot 12G and knelt. But she wasn't placing flowers this time. She was pulling them out of the ground, white lilies, growing wild where none had been planted. She pulled up handful after handful, gathering them into a bouquet. When she had enough, she stood and turned around. I was standing 20 feet away. He looked directly at me. Her face was covered in soil, not like she'd been crying, and dirt had stuck to tears, covered like she'd been buried and dug her way out. She smiled, held up the lilies, then what was gone. I ran to the plot. The ground was torn up where the lilies had been pulled, deep gouges in the soil. But when I looked closer, the gouges weren't from the surface. They were from below. Something had pushed through from underneath, making the flowers grow. I put in my notice the next day, but I still drive past Holy Cross on my way to my new job. I can't help it. It's on the route. Last Saturday, I saw the woman in the blue coat walking through the main gate. She was carrying white lilies, and she was wearing my old work jacket. I lock the burial ledger in the vault every night at exactly 6 o'clock, and every morning I find new names written in old entries. My name is Ava Petrov, and I have worked as the records keeper at Fairview Cemetery in Boston, Massachusetts for 18 years. I maintain the burial records, the plot maps, the historical archives, everything that proves who is buried where and when. The ledger is my responsibility. It's a physical book, leather bound, started in 1942 when the cemetery opened. Every burial since then is recorded in that book in chronological order, written in ink, signed and dated. The ledger doesn't change. It's a historical document. Once an entry is made, it's permanent. That's how archives work. Until 3 months ago, that was true. The first time I noticed it was on a Tuesday morning in September. I unlocked the vault, retrieved the ledger, and carried it to my desk to record a burial from the previous day. I was flipping through to find the most recent entry when I saw a name I didn't recognize in the July 1947 section. Eleanor Vasquez, lost at sea, recovered, buried plot 14C. The handwriting wasn't mine, wasn't any of my predecessors either. I know their writing styles from years of working with the records. This was different, cramped, shaky, written in the same black ink we use for official entries, but the penmanship was wrong. I checked the plot map. 14C was occupied, had been since 1947. The entry matched the date, but I'd never seen that entry before. I'd reviewed the 1940s section dozens of times for historical research requests. I knew those pages. Eleanor Vasquez had not been there last week. I made a note, figured maybe I'd missed it somehow. Went about my day. The next morning, there were 3 new names, all in the 1940s sections, all in the same shaky handwriting, all with the same notation: lost at sea, recovered. I checked obituaries, found them. All 3 people, different surnames, different ages, but all reported missing or lost at sea between 1945 and 1949. Never found, never recovered, listed in newspapers as presumed dead. But according to the ledger, they were buried in our cemetery. I checked the plots, all occupied, all with headstones from the correct time period, all with death dates matching the entries. But I knew those entries hadn't been there before. I started taking photos of the ledger pages every night before locking it away, documenting every entry, every page. The next morning, I compared the photos to the physical book. 4 new entries, different pages, different years, all in the 1940s, all the same. Lost at sea, recovered. The handwriting was getting clearer, less shaky, more confident. I brought it to the cemetery director, showed him the photos, showed him the new entries. He looked at the ledger, looked at me, and said, "These have always been here, Ava. You're just noticing them now." I showed him the dated photos, proof that the entries were appearing overnight. He frowned, told me the timestamps could be wrong, told me I was stressed, suggested I take a few days off. I didn't take time off. I started staying late, watching the vault. The ledger is locked inside a climate-controlled vault in my office every night. The vault has one key. I keep it on me at all times. No one can access the ledger without that key. But the entries kept appearing every morning. More names, more lost at sea notations. Always in the 1940s sections. Always people who were never found, never recovered, never buried anywhere. By October, there were 47 new entries. I started cross-referencing everything, found maritime records, naval documents, Coast Guard reports. Every single name in those new entries corresponded to a real person, real disappearances, real tragedies, people who went into the ocean between 1943 and 1951 and never came back. But they weren't buried here. They couldn't be. There was no record of any mass burial, no notation about naval casualties or recovered remains. Just these entries appearing in a locked book, written in handwriting that didn't match any living person. I installed a camera in my office, pointed it directly at the vault, set it to record all night. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. The vault door never opened. The lock never turned. But at 2:47 in the morning, the camera glitched, static for 3 seconds. When the image cleared, everything looked the same. I checked the ledger. 5 new entries, same time period, same notation, same handwriting. I stopped trying to explain it, stopped showing people the photos, just documented everything in a separate log I kept at home. The names, the dates, the pattern. Because there was a pattern. The entries were appearing in chronological order of disappearance, starting with the earliest lost at sea cases from 1943 and working forward, slowly filling in gaps, like someone was going through historical records and making corrections, updating the archive with people who should have been recorded but weren't. By November, the entries had reached 1950. The handwriting had changed completely. It was neat now, professional. It looked almost exactly like the handwriting of Margaret Donnelly, the cemetery's first records keeper. She'd died in 1952. I'd seen her entries throughout the ledger. She'd recorded every burial from the cemetery's opening until her death. But this wasn't her handwriting from the 1940s. This was her handwriting from the early 50s. The slight tremor she developed near the end. The way her letters slanted differently after her stroke. I pulled Margaret's personnel file from the archives. Found a photo. She was standing in front of the vault, holding the ledger, smiling at the camera. The date on the back, May 1951. That night, I took the ledger home. Broke protocol, didn't care. I needed to see what would happen if it wasn't in the vault. I locked it in my apartment, in a safe, watched it all night. At 2:47 in the morning, I heard the sound of pages turning. The safe was still locked, but I could hear it. The whisper of paper, the scratch of a pen, the soft sigh of someone working late into the night. When I opened the safe at dawn, there were 8 new entries. I brought the ledger back to the cemetery, put it in the vault, locked it, went about my work like nothing was wrong. The entries kept appearing, 53 total now, all from the late 1940s, early 50s, all lost at sea, all recovered according to the ledger. Yesterday, I found a new entry that made me stop. Ava Petrov, records keeper, lost at sea, recovered, buried plot 31J. The date was blank, the handwriting was Margaret's, but plot 31J doesn't exist yet. It's in the new expansion section, not scheduled for development until next year. I checked this morning. The plot has been surveyed, corners marked, but there's no burial scheduled, no paperwork, just an empty plot with my name attached to it in a ledger entry that shouldn't exist. I'm not lost at sea. I've never been near the ocean. I don't know what it means. But every morning when I unlock the vault, I check that entry first. The date is still blank, but the handwriting is getting darker, like someone is tracing over it, making it permanent, making it real. The backhoe broke through into something that shouldn't exist, and I saw how they buried the dead in 1952. My name is Marcus Cole, and I have worked as a gravedigger at Pinewood Cemetery in Cleveland, Ohio for 11 years. I've dug thousands of graves. I know the soil here, clay and rocks for the first 3 feet, then softer earth below. I know what's normal. I know when the ground doesn't feel right. The expansion project for the old mass burial section didn't feel right from the start. The cemetery board wanted to reclaim part of the Potter's Field area for new plots. The section had been closed since the early 1960s, filled to capacity with indigent burials. Standard procedure is to leave those areas undisturbed, but the board said we needed the space. They had ground penetrating radar surveys done, checked the records, confirmed the last burial was in 1961. We were supposed to dig along the western edge, expanding outward without disturbing existing graves. I was running the backhoe, clearing soil for new plots about 15 feet from the nearest marked burial. Easy work, routine. The bucket went through at 8 feet down, not through soil, through something hollow. I felt it, the sudden give, the way the machine lurched forward. I killed the engine immediately. The silence afterward was total, just wind through the old oaks and the tick of cooling metal. I climbed down, looked into the trench. The backhoe had broken through a casket. Wood, mostly rotted, but intact enough that I could see what I'd done. I could see inside. The casket was upside down, lid facing toward the bottom of the grave, handles pointing up. The body inside, what was left of it, was positioned face down. I could see the back of the skull, the spine, the way the arms were tucked beneath the torso. I called my supervisor. He came out, looked into the trench, and made a face. Happens sometimes with old burials. Casket flips during settling. We'll note it, rebury properly, move on. But caskets don't flip. Not at 8 feet down in compacted clay. Not without leaving evidence of the soil being disturbed. We widened the excavation carefully, used hand tools. What we found made my supervisor call the cemetery director. There were more caskets, all of them upside down, all of them in a cluster, stacked and arranged like someone had deliberately placed them that way. The director came out with the burial records, checked the dates, cross-referenced the plot numbers. The section we'd broken into wasn't marked on any map, wasn't supposed to have burials, but the records showed 32 interments in that location during 1 week in late October 1952. All county cases, all unclaimed, all buried by state contract. Every single burial record had the same notation as requested by the state. We excavated the entire area, took 3 days. What we uncovered was methodical. 32 caskets, all made of the same cheap pine, all inverted, all arranged in concentric circles. The outermost ring had 12 caskets. The next ring had 10, then 6, then 4. The center had 0. Empty space, a circular void about 6 feet in diameter, surrounded by upside-down coffins. The burial records listed 32 bodies. We found 32 caskets, but the arrangement suggested they were placed around something, oriented towards something that wasn't there. We photographed everything, documented the positions. The county medical examiner came out, authorized us to open 1 casket to verify contents and approximate date of burial. We chose one from the outer ring, turned it right side up, pried open the lid carefully. The body was in perfect condition, not preserved, not embalmed. I could tell from the lack of trocar wounds or preparation marks, but intact. Skin like leather, features still visible, male, middle aged, wearing clothes from the 1950s, no decay, no liquefaction, no insect activity, like he'd been buried yesterday. The medical examiner took samples, ordered full excavation, said we needed to check all 32 caskets. We opened them one by one over the next week. Every single body was the same, perfectly preserved, no embalming, ages ranging from early 20s to late 60s, men and women, different clothing styles, all from the early 50s. All of them looked like they'd died peacefully. All of them had the same small detail, dirt under their fingernails, fresh dirt, like they'd been digging. The medical examiner couldn't explain the preservation, sent samples to 3 different labs. All came back with the same conclusion, natural mummification, but the soil conditions weren't right for it. Too much moisture, wrong pH. The bodies but should have decomposed completely decades ago, but they hadn't. We reburied them. State ordered it. Said there was no public health concern, no evidence of foul play. Just an odd preservation anomaly and an unusual burial arrangement. We were instructed to place them in new caskets, right side up, in proper graves with proper markers. The reburial took 2 days. We processed them in order, starting from the outer ring and working inward. Each body was transferred to a new casket, given a plot number, buried correctly. On the second day, when we moved the last casket from the innermost ring, I saw what they'd been arranged around. The empty center circle wasn't empty. There was a hole, about 3 feet wide, going straight down past the 8-foot depth where the caskets had been placed. I got a flashlight, lay flat on the ground, looked down into it. The hole went deep, further than my light could reach. The walls were smooth, carved, not natural, and about 20 feet down, I could see something moving, not falling, not sliding, moving deliberately, ascending. I pulled back, told my supervisor. He looked, said that he didn't see anything, said it was probably just water seepage or loose soil, ordered me to fill it. I filled it, used the backhoe to push soil from the excavation back into that center hole. It took all the remaining dirt from the dig site. The hole swallowed it, didn't fill, just kept accepting more and more soil until I ran out. I tamped it, compacted it, made it level with the surrounding ground, planted grass seed. The next morning, there was a depression, circular, about 6 feet in diameter, same size as the empty center from the original burial arrangement. I filled it again. It came back. I've filled it 7 times now. It always comes back, always the same size, always centered exactly where those 32 caskets had been arranged in their circles. Last week, I came out early, wanted to see if I could catch the ground settling, figure out where the soil was going. I got there at dawn. The depression was fresh, still settling. I heard sounds coming from it, scraping, like fingernails on wood. I got the flashlight, looked down into the depression. The soil at the bottom was moving, not settling, moving, being pushed up from below in small increments, like something was digging its way toward the surface. I saw a hand, just for a second, tail, dirt under the fingernails, reaching up through the soil before sinking back down. I filled it again that day, used twice as much dirt, compacted it with the backhoe until the ground was hard as concrete. This morning, the depression was back, deeper this time, almost 2 feet down at the center, and around the edges, arranged in a perfect circle, I found the 32 small holes in the ground, each one about 3 inches wide, each one going straight down into the earth, like something had drilled up from below. 32 somethings, all emerging around the central point where they'd been buried facing down. I'm not filling it anymore, I told the director. He said to leave it, said it was a drainage issue, said the county would handle it. But I know what it is. They weren't buried facing down to keep them in the ground. They were buried that way so they could dig. The security cameras show heat signatures moving in organized rows beneath the frozen ground, and they stop at exactly 4:47 every morning. My name is Ray Bishop, and I have worked as the night watchman at Lakeside Cemetery in Minneapolis, Minnesota for 7 years. I monitor 12 cameras positioned throughout the grounds. 6 are standard visible light cameras for monitoring gates and pathways. 6 are thermal infrared cameras for detecting wildlife and trespassers in low visibility. I know how to read the footage. I know what heat signatures look like on frozen ground. I know when something's wrong. The IR cameras started showing anomalies in January. Nothing dramatic at first, just small variations in ground temperature in the indigent section, Section 9, the Potter's Field area in the northwest corner. Patches of warmth showing up on the thermal display, appearing and disappearing over the course of my shift. I figured it was underground steam pipes or electrical lines generating residual heat. Minneapolis gets cold. Infrastructure runs under most of the cemetery. Heat bleeds through. Normal. But the patterns weren't normal. The warm spots appeared in rows, evenly spaced, about 6 feet apart in a grid formation. And they moved, not constantly, not quickly, but over the course of an hour, I could watch a warm spot shift position by a few feet, drifting slowly across the thermal display, like something beneath the surface was repositioning itself. I checked the cemetery maps. No pipes in Section 9, no electrical lines, no infrastructure at all, just graves. 463 burials dating back to 1968, all indigent cases, all unmarked except for a central memorial stone. I mentioned it to the day supervisor. He pulled up the daytime thermal footage. Nothing. The ground showed normal temperature variations during sunlight hours. Cold, frozen, no anomalies. Probably just frost heave, he said. Ground contracts and expands, plays tricks on thermal imaging. Don't worry about it. But I started recording the footage, saving clips, documenting the movement. The warm spots appeared every night around midnight, always in the same general area, always moving in the same direction, clockwise, rotating slowly around a central point, like the spokes of a wheel turning. By February, the pattern was undeniable. 47 distinct heat signatures, all moving in synchronized rotation, each signature roughly the size and shape of a human body lying horizontal, each one positioned exactly where burial plots should be. I overlaid the thermal footage on the burial map. The heat signatures corresponded perfectly to graves, not random spots, actual recorded burial locations. People who'd been in the ground for decades, showing up as warm spots on infrared. I started timing the movement. The rotation was precise. 47 heat signatures, completing one full revolution every 6 hours. Moving at a constant rate, no variation, no pauses, and every morning at 4:47, the movement stopped. Not gradually, instantly, all 47 signatures freezing in place simultaneously, like someone had hit a pause button. They'd stay stationary for about 3 minutes, then fade. By 5 a.m., the thermal display showed nothing but frozen ground. I brought it to the cemetery director in March, showed him the footage, the overlay maps, the timing logs. He watched the clips, frowned, called the camera technician. The technician checked the IR cameras, ran diagnostics, found nothing wrong. The cameras were functioning perfectly. The heat signatures were real, actually present, not glitches or artifacts. Could be thermal venting from decomposition, the technician said. Old graves sometimes release gas pockets, creates heat blooms on infrared. But decomposition doesn't move in synchronized patterns, doesn't rotate clockwise at a constant rate, doesn't stop at the exact same time every morning. I kept recording. By April, I noticed something new. The heat signatures were getting brighter, more intense. The temperature differential was increasing week by week. What had started as faint warmth barely visible on the thermal scale was now showing up as distinct hot spots. And they were rising. I could see it in the footage. The signatures were moving closer to the surface. When they first appeared in January, the heat blooms suggested depth, about 6 feet down, diffused through soil. Now they looked shallower, maybe 4 feet, more concentrated. I started checking the physical graves during my rounds. Walking through Section 9 with a flashlight, looking for evidence of disturbance. The ground was frozen solid, no subsidence, no settling, no indication anything below was moving, but the thermal cameras didn't lie. In May, I saw the first one break through. I was watching the monitor at 3 a.m. The heat signatures were in their usual rotation, moving clockwise around the central memorial. Then one of them, lower left quadrant, third row, suddenly spiked in temperature. The bloom intensified, got brighter, started rising faster than the others. I watched it climb through the thermal strata, getting closer and closer to the surface. The heat signature changed shape, became more vertical, more defined. At 4:47 a.m., it stopped, but it didn't fade. It stayed, a vertical column of heat, roughly human-sized, standing upright in the middle of Section 9. I switched to the visible light camera, pointed at that area, saw nothing, just frozen ground and grass stubble. But the thermal camera showed someone standing there, someone warm, someone who'd come up from 6 feet below. I grabbed a flashlight, went outside, walked to Section 9. The ground was undisturbed, no footprints in the frost, no evidence anyone had been there. But when I checked the thermal feed later, the signature was still there, still standing, still warm. It faded at 5:03 a.m., just disappeared, but the next night it came back. Same location, same vertical shape, and this time it wasn't alone. Three more signatures broke through, rose from their horizontal positions to vertical, stood in section 9 until 4:47, then remained upright for 15 minutes before fading. Every night, more of them rose, more heat signatures transitioning from horizontal to vertical, more bodies standing in the frozen dark. By June, 30 of the 47 were standing. The thermal footage looked like a crowd, a gathering, all of them upright, all of them facing the same direction, toward the central memorial stone. I stopped going outside during my shift, just watched the monitors, documented everything. The standing signatures didn't move laterally, they just stood, waiting. Last week, the remaining 17 signatures rose. All 47 are standing now. Every night, all arranged in concentric circles around the memorial, all facing inward, and they're getting warmer. The temperature readings are climbing. What started as barely visible heat blooms are now showing as bright white on the thermal scale. Hot, much hotter than a living human body should be. I checked the burial records for Section 9, all 463 indigent burials. Cross-referenced the dates, found a pattern. 47 of them died during the same winter, 1968 to 1969, all during a 3-month period, all from hypothermia, all found frozen to death in various locations around the city. They were buried together in the same section in a grid pattern, and now they're standing, warming up, rising through the frozen ground every night at midnight, and staying vertical until dawn. This morning, at 4:47, they didn't stop moving. They started walking, all 47 heat signatures moving in unison, not rotating anymore, advancing, marching in organized rows toward the southern edge of Section 9, toward the road, toward the city. I called it in, called everyone, cemetery director, police, thermal imaging specialists. They all came, checked the cameras, verified the footage was real. No one saw anything on visible light, just empty frozen ground. But the thermal cameras showed 47 people walking out of the cemetery, walking south, their heat signatures burning brighter with every step. They're still moving, still showing up on every thermal camera in their path, still invisible to the naked eye, still getting warmer, and tomorrow night they'll be back at Section 9, back in their grid, lying horizontal beneath the frost. Until midnight. The body bag zipper fogged from the inside, and when I wiped the condensation away, letters appeared in the moisture. My name is Nora Kim, and I have worked as an embalmer at Westgate Funeral Home in Seattle, Washington, for 13 years. I prepare the dead for viewing, for burial, for cremation. I've worked with thousands of bodies. I know the stages of decomposition, the physical changes that happen after death, the science of preservation. I know that dead bodies don't breathe. The county case came in on a Wednesday night in November. Unidentified male, approximately 55 years old, found deceased in a condemned building on the south side. No wallet, no phone, no identification. The transport crew delivered him in a standard black body bag, sealed and tagged with a county case number, no name, just unknown mail on the paperwork. Standard Potter's Field preparation, no viewing, no service, just basic sanitation and placement in a county casket for burial. Simple work. I've done it hundreds of times. I unzipped the bag. The man looked peaceful, thin, weathered face, gray stubble, wearing old jeans and a flannel shirt. No obvious cause of death, probably exposure or medical emergency. The county would determine that during autopsy review. My job was just to clean him, prepare him for burial. I transferred him to the prep table, started the standard process. Washing, positioning, checking for personal effects. He had nothing, empty pockets, no jewelry, no identifying marks or scars. I was halfway through the preparation when I noticed the body bag zipper. It was fogged, condensation on the inside of the clear plastic window panel, like someone had been breathing in there. I wiped it away with my glove. The moisture cleared. I went back to work. 5 minutes later, the zipper was fogged again. I stopped, looked at the body bag hanging on the hook where I'd left it. The condensation was fresh, thick enough that I couldn't see through the clear panel. Just white fog, like breath on a cold window. I checked the room temperature, 62 degrees. Cool enough for preservation, but not cold enough to create natural condensation on plastic. I checked the ventilation, normal airflow, no humidity issues. I walked over to the body bag, wiped the fog away again, watched to see if it would return. It did, slowly, building up from the inside, like someone was exhaling onto the plastic. I opened the bag completely, checked the interior. Empty. Nothing inside but the faint smell of the deceased and the paper sheet we used to line the bags. No source for the condensation. I went back to the body on the table, continued the preparation, finished the washing, arranged the clothing, prepared to transfer him to the county casket. That's when I saw the letters, not on paper, on the body bag zipper in the condensation. Someone had written something in the fog. I walked over, looked closer. Thank you. 2 words, written in the moisture, like someone had traced their finger across the fogged plastic. The letters were clear, deliberate. They hadn't been there when I wiped the fog away before. I checked the prep room. The door was locked. I was alone. Security footage would show no one else had entered, but someone had written on that body bag. I grabbed my phone, took a photo. The letters showed up clearly in the image. Well, actually, there. I wiped them away, watched the bag. The condensation started forming again immediately. Faster this time, building up in seconds instead of minutes, and as it formed, new letters appeared. For my name, I stepped back, looked at the body on the table. Unknown male, no identification, no name, just a county case number and a plot assignment in Potter's Field. The fog on the body bag continued to build, more letters forming in the moisture. I was Patrick. Patrick. The name repeated. Patrick, 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 covering the entire clear panel of the body bag in shaky condensation letters. I checked the body again, looked for any identifying features I might have missed, found a faded tattoo on his left shoulder, partially decomposed but still visible, just a name. Patrick. I updated the county paperwork, changed unknown male to possibly Patrick, Tattoo identification. Made a note for the county to cross-reference missing persons named Patrick. Did everything I could to give him an identity. When I turned back to the body bag, the condensation was gone. The plastic was clear, dry, no fog, no letters, just an empty bag. I finished the preparation, transferred Patrick to the county casket, sealed it, tagged it with the updated information. The burial was scheduled for Friday morning. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the letters, about the name, about how desperate someone had to be to reach out from death just to be called by their name. I ran a search. Missing persons named Patrick in the Seattle area. Found 6 active cases. One of them matched. Patrick Hernandez, age 54, missing for 3 years. Last seen near the south side. No identifying information except an old booking photo. The face matched. The tattoo matched. It was him. I called the county, updated the case file, provided the missing persons report. They confirmed the identity through dental records. Patrick Hernandez was no longer unknown. The funeral was rescheduled. His sister claimed the body, arranged for a proper service. I attended, stood in the back, watched his sister cry over a casket that finally had the right name on it. After the service, she thanked me, said they'd been looking for Patrick for 3 years, said she could finally have closure. She asked how I'd identified him. I told her about the tattoo, didn't mention the rest. I thought that was the end of it, but last week, we received another county case, unknown female, found in a shelter, no identification. I brought her to the prep room, unzipped the body bag, started the standard preparation. Halfway through, the zipper fogged. I wiped it away. It came back, and in the condensation, letters appeared. Thank you for Patrick, and then a name. I am Helen. I checked for identifying marks. Found a scar pattern on her right hand. Hospital bracelet, tan line on her left wrist. Updated the county paperwork. Started searching, found her. Helen Torres, missing for 18 months. Dental records confirmed. Her family buried her with her name. Since then, I've had 11 more county cases, 11 more unidentified bodies, 11 more times the body bag fogged from the inside and spelled out a name in condensation. Every single one I've been able to identify. Every single one went to their families with their real names. The county thinks I'm exceptionally good at finding identifying marks. They've commended my attention to detail. They don't know about the letters, about the fog, about the way the dead introduce themselves. I don't tell them. I just wipe away the condensation, write down the names, and make sure no one else is buried as unknown. Because they're not unknown. They're Patrick and Helen and Maria and James and all the others who just needed someone to see them, someone to call them by name. And I'll keep looking, keep reading the letters in the fog, keep making sure they're remembered, because everyone deserves to have their name spoken, even the dead. The cemetery hired me to digitize their plot records, and I found 200 graves that exist physically, but appear on no map, deed, or document. My name is Todd Armitage, and I have worked as a land surveyor and cemetery cartographer in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, for 23 years. I specialize in historical cemetery documentation, measuring plots, verifying boundaries, creating digital archives of burial records. I've mapped over 40 cemeteries. I know how to read old deeds, how to account for boundary shifts, how to reconcile historical records with modern GPS coordinates. I've never found graves that weren't supposed to exist. Grace Hill Cemetery hired me in March. Standard project: digitize their plot maps, create a searchable database, verify all existing graves match the historical records. The cemetery opened in 1897. Records were kept in ledgers until the 1960s, then transferred to card files, then to a basic computer system in the 90s. My job was to consolidate everything, create one master map, account for every grave. I started with the physical survey, walking the grounds with GPS equipment, marking every headstone, every plot boundary, every section. Standard procedure. Takes about 6 weeks for a cemetery this size. I found the unmarked section in week 2. It's in the northeast corner, past the mausoleums, behind a dense stand of old pines. No paths lead to it, no signage, just a clearing roughly 100 feet square, with grass growing wild and no headstones visible. I almost skipped it. Looked like empty ground, but my GPS showed I hadn't covered that area yet, so I pushed through the pines to map it. The ground was uneven, settled like old graves without markers. I walked the perimeter, taking measurements. The area was clearly part of the cemetery property. The deed boundaries included it. But there were no monuments, no evidence of burials, just disturbed earth in regular rows. I marked it as unmarked section and moved on. When I started comparing the physical survey to the historical records, the discrepancy became obvious. The GPS data showed burial formations in the northeast corner. The historical records showed nothing. No section designation, no plot numbers, no burial entries for that area. I checked the deeds. The land had been part of the cemetery since 1898, but there was no notation about what it was used for, just a blank spot on every map. I went back with ground penetrating radar, wanted to confirm what was below. The radar showed graves, lots of them, roughly 200 burial plots in organized rows, all approximately 6 feet deep. Standard cemetery layout, but deeper. The graves registered at 16 feet down. Normal burial depth is 6 feet. Mausoleums might go 8 or 9 feet for multiple levels, but 16 feet of earth above a grave is wrong. That's not burial, that's hiding. I brought my findings to the cemetery director, showed him the radar data, the survey maps, the absence of records. He looked at everything and frowned. That section was closed before my time, he said. I'll check the archives. The archives had nothing. No burial records, no purchase deeds for plots, no maintenance logs. The section existed physically. I could show him exactly where it was on the property, but there was no documentation that it had ever been used. We decided to do a test excavation. Just one spot. Verify what was down there. Get soil samples. Maybe find a marker or identification that would tell us what we were dealing with. I marked a location in the center of the section. The cemetery hired a contractor with the excavation equipment. We got the permits, started digging on a Monday morning. The first 6 feet were normal cemetery soil, clay, rocks, compacted earth. At 8 feet, we hit a layer of something different. Concrete, poured concrete about 2 feet thick. We broke through it. Below the concrete was more soil, but this soil was different, darker, smelled wrong, chemical, like something had been treated or preserved. At 12 feet, we found the first casket, plain wood, no ornamentation, no nameplate, just rough pine boards nailed together. The contractor carefully exposed the top. We could see the coffin was intact, sealed. I called for the medical examiner. This was beyond my expertise. We needed official oversight before going further. The medical examiner arrived, authorized opening the casket. We documented everything, photographed every stage. When we finally pried open the lid, we found a body, perfectly preserved, male, middle-aged, wearing clothes from the early 1900s, no embalming. I could tell from the lack of typical preparation signs. But no decay, no decomposition, just a man who looked like he died yesterday but was dressed for a century ago. There was no identification, no personal effects, just the body and a small metal tag nailed to the inside of the coffin lid, a number, 047. We excavated 2 more graves, found 2 more bodies, both preserved the same way, both with numbered tags. 103 and 164. The medical examiner ordered a full investigation. State archaeologists were called in. We excavated 10 graves total. All of them contained preserved bodies. All from the early 1900s, based on clothing and coffin construction, all tagged with numbers. None of them matched any death certificate in the city records. None of them appeared in any cemetery log. None of them had names. The section was officially designated a historical burial ground. The excavation was stopped. The graves were left undisturbed, but I kept working on the survey. I measured the entire section precisely, created a plot map based on the GPR data, 200 graves arranged in 20 rows of 10, all at 16 feet, all sealed under 2 feet of concrete. Then I found the pattern. The grave numbers weren't random, they corresponded to dates. I cross-referenced the tags we'd found, 047, 103, 164, with historical events. Found matches, number 047, April 7th, 1918. A hospital in Philadelphia reported a ward full of patients who died overnight from unknown causes. 47 patients, no bodies ever claimed. Number 103, October 3rd, 1919. A tenement building collapse. 103 people killed. Most bodies were never identified or claimed by families. Number 164, January 64th, 1920. A ferry accident in the Delaware River. 164 passengers drowned, many bodies never recovered. Every number corresponded to a mass casualty event in Philadelphia between 1918 and 1923. Every grave in that section contained someone from these events. People who died in groups, people who were lost in the chaos, people who had no one to claim them, and someone had buried them 16 feet deep under concrete with no names and no records. I found a document, eventually, hidden in the city archives, not in the cemetery files, a public health order from 1923. It authorized the deep interment of unclaimed deceased from recent disasters, said it was for sanitation purposes, said the location would remain unmarked to prevent panic. The document listed one location, northeast corner of Grace Hill Cemetery. It was signed by the city health commissioner, dated March 19th, 1923. I went back to the section last week, just stood there, looked at the ground, thought about the 200 people beneath my feet, people who died violently or suddenly in disasters, people who were never mourned properly, never given names on their graves. The ground was settling, subsiding in small circular patterns, like the concrete was cracking below, like something was making space. I measured the subsidence, though, documented it. The depressions are appearing in the exact locations where I marked graves on my GPR survey. One depression for each burial, 200 total. They're getting deeper. And yesterday, when I was taking final measurements, I found something that wasn't there before. Footprints in the soft earth around the depressions, leading away from the graves, leading out of the section toward the main cemetery. 200 sets of footprints, all barefoot, all the same depth, all heading in the same direction, toward the chapel. The cemetery director asked me to finish the digital map. I told him I would, but I'm not going back to the northeast section, because when I checked the chapel this morning, I found something. The doors were open. The interior was empty, but along the walls, arranged in rows like they were waiting for a service, I counted 200 dusty impressions in the floor, like 200 people had stood there and then left. We found the iron casket standing upright in the center of a mass grave, and the burial log had only one word next to the date, contained. My name is Paulina Reyes, and I have worked as burial crew chief at Riverside Memorial Park in Detroit, Michigan, for 16 years. I oversee grave excavations, coordinate burials, maintain the Potter's Field sections. I've supervised the opening of old graves for reinterment, the relocation of entire cemetery sections for development projects. I know what belongs in the ground and what doesn't. The iron casket didn't belong. We were expanding Section 14, the old mass burial area from the 1980s. The cemetery needed space. The board voted to reclaim part of the closed Potter's Field for new plots. Standard procedure, ground penetrating radar to locate existing graves, careful excavation, respectful relocation if necessary. The radar showed the mass grave exactly where the records indicated. Roughly 40 burials in a common plot, all indigent cases from between 1982 and 1987. The plan was to excavate around it, leave it undisturbed, build the new section adjacent. But the backhoe operator hit something at 7 feet that shouldn't have been there. Metal. The bucket caught on something solid, scraped across it with a sound that made everyone stop. I called a halt to the excavation. We switched to hand tools, carefully exposed what we'd hit, an iron casket. Small, maybe 3 feet long, infant sized. It was standing upright, vertical, buried in the center of the adult mass grave, like a post driven into the ground. The iron was old, pitted with rust, but intact, heavy, industrial, and it was padlocked. Not a funeral home lock, a padlock. Thick steel, rusted but still secure, threaded through hasp brackets welded to the casket, like someone had sealed it and didn't want it opened. I checked the burial records for Section 14. The mass grave was documented, 40 adult burials, all listed by date and county case number. No mention of a child, no mention of an iron casket, no mention of anything unusual, but there was a notation, handwritten in the margin, next to the date the mass grave was closed, contained. Just that word, no explanation. I called the cemetery director. He came out, looked at the casket, checked the records, frowned. Leave it, he said. Mark the location. We'll excavate around it. But I needed to know the depth, needed to know how deep the casket went so we could plan the new plots properly. We carefully dug around it, exposing the sides. The casket went down 12 feet, buried vertically, standing upright, surrounded by the horizontal adult burials, like it was the center point they'd been arranged around. I measured everything, documented it. The iron casket was positioned exactly in the middle of the 40 grave mass burial site. The adult caskets radiated outward from it in a circular pattern. Perfect spacing, deliberate arrangement. Someone had buried this small iron casket first, then arranged 40 adult burials around it. The cemetery director ordered us to leave it in place. It's clearly intentional, he said. Part of the historical burial. Don't disturb it. But I kept thinking about that word. Contained. I researched the cemetery records. Searched for any mention of infant burials in 1982 through 87. Found nothing in the main ledgers. But in the county records, I found something. A transfer document. Dated August 1984. Authorization for the county to transfer one specialized containment to Riverside Memorial Park for permanent interment. No name, no case number, just specialized containment and a reference number. I traced the reference number, found it in state institutional records. A facility that closed in 1983, a psychiatric hospital for children with severe behavioral issues. The hospital had burned down. Most of the records were destroyed, but the transfer document survived, and it specified that the containment was to be buried at maximum depth in isolation with adult interments placed as barrier. Maximum depth, isolation, barrier. I went back to Section 14 at night, just to see it. The iron casket was still partially exposed from our excavation. We'd covered it with a tarp, marked the area as off limits. I pulled back the tarp, looked at the casket in the moonlight. The padlock was old, probably from the 80s, but it was still locked, still secure. I noticed something I'd missed during the day, scratches on the inside of the iron, visible through the rust holes where the metal had deteriorated, scratches like someone had clawed at the interior, small scratches, child-sized fingernails. I stepped back, covered it again, walked away, but that night I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about a child in an iron casket, buried standing up, locked from the outside, surrounded by 40 adult graves like some kind of perimeter. I went back the next morning, checked the records again, found one more document, a medical examiner's note from August 1984, attached to the transfer authorization. It said, "Subject deceased during facility fire, cause of death, smoke inhalation, recommend sealed containment burial due to documented pre-mortem behavioral anomalies, no viewing, no service, immediate interment per state protocol." Behavioral anomalies, sealed containment, state protocol. A child died in a hospital fire, and instead of a normal burial, they put the body in an iron casket, padlocked it, and buried it standing up at 12 feet deep, then surrounded it with 40 adult burials. I showed the documents to the director. He read them, looked at me. "This stays between us. We're not opening that casket. We're not moving it. We build around it." The expansion project continued. We excavated the new plots on all sides of Section 14, leaving the mass grave undisturbed. The iron casket stayed buried. We poured a concrete cap over the area, marked it as a memorial section, covered it with grass. But I started having dreams. A child's voice, calling from underground, asking to be let out, promising to be good. I ignored them. Dreams are just dreams. Then the sounds started. During my shifts, when I was working near Section 14, I'd hear tapping, metal on metal, rhythmic, like someone knocking on the inside of an iron box. I'd stop, listen. The tapping would continue for a few seconds, then stop. I told myself it was settling. Old metal contracting, normal cemetery sounds. But last week, one of the new graves we dug near Section 14 collapsed. Not subsided. Collapsed. The bottom of the grave gave way, dropping the excavated soil into a void below. I looked down into the hole, saw darkness, and far below, a reflection. Metal. Rust-colored. The iron casket had shifted, somehow, over the decades. It had tilted. It wasn't vertical anymore. It was angled, leaning, like something inside had been throwing its weight against the walls, trying to tip it over. We filled the collapsed grave, moved the burial to a different location. I filed a report about ground instability in Section 14. But I didn't mention what I saw at the bottom of that void. The padlock was open, hanging from the hasp, unlocked, and the lid of the iron casket was ajar, just slightly, just enough to see darkness inside. I haven't gone back to Section 14, haven't checked to see if anything came out. I just keep my crew ovened from that area. Tell them the ground is unstable. Tell them it's unsafe. But every night when I'm closing up, I hear the tapping, faint, distant, coming from the memorial section where we capped the mass grave. Metal on metal, rhythmic, patient. And sometimes, in the morning, I find small footprints in the dew on the grass near Section 14. Barefoot, child-sized, leading away from the memorial, leading toward the road. I don't follow them. I just erase them before anyone else sees. And I wonder what we contained and what happens now that it's out. The bouquet arrived 3 days before the grave was scheduled to be dug, and when we buried her, the flowers were already there, wilted brown with roots still in soil. My name is Yusuf Harden, and I have worked as the funeral director at Greenwood Memorial in Atlanta, Georgia, for 19 years. I coordinate services, manage schedules, oversee burials. I know the timeline of death, notification, preparation, service, interment. Everything happens in order. Flowers arrive after death, not before. The delivery came on a Monday morning, standard floral arrangement, white roses and lilies, addressed to Plot God's Acre, Unmarked 9, Greenwood Memorial. No sender name, just a small card tucked into the flowers. See you soon, beloved. I checked our burial schedule. Plot God's Acre, Unmarked 9, was in our Potter's Field section. We assigned the unmarked plots sequentially. 9 wasn't occupied yet, wasn't even scheduled. The next indigent burial was assigned to unmarked 7. 9 was still empty ground. I called the florist. They confirmed the delivery, said it had been ordered online, paid in full, with specific instructions to deliver to that exact plot location. The order had been placed Sunday night. Should we still deliver? The florist asked. I didn't know what to tell them. The plot didn't exist yet, wasn't dug, had no marker, but the flowers had already been paid for, already arrived at the funeral home. I'll take them to the location, I said. I carried the bouquet to God's Acre section, found the survey stakes marking where unmarked 9 would eventually be. Just an empty ground, grass, no indication anyone would be buried there. I placed the flowers at the edge of the plot, stepped back, felt strange about it, like I was marking a grave that didn't exist yet. That afternoon, we received notification of an indigent death. Female, mid-60s, unidentified, found deceased in a shelter. County case, no next of kin, standard Potter's Field burial. The county assigned her to our next available unmarked plot. Plot God's Acre, Unmarked 9. I checked the death notification timestamp. She'd been found Monday morning, pronounced dead at 8:47 a.m. But the flowers had been delivered at 8:30, before she died. I told myself it was coincidence. Timestamps can be wrong. Medical examiner could have made an error. The flowers were probably meant for a different plot, different cemetery. Simple mistake. But the card said, "See you soon, beloved." Not "rest in peace," not "in loving memory." See you soon. Future tense. The burial was scheduled for Thursday morning. Standard county service. No attendees expected. Just me, the burial crew, and the county chaplain. I went out to God's Acre on Wednesday afternoon to verify the grave had been dug. The crew had finished early. Plot 9 was ready. 6 feet deep, neat walls, tarp covering. The flowers I'd placed there Monday were gone. I looked around the area, checked nearby plots. Nothing. The bouquet had disappeared. I figured someone had removed it. Maintenance crew, cemetery staff, someone who thought it was misplaced. Thursday morning, I arrived at dawn to prepare for the burial. The hearse was already there, casket loaded. The burial crew was setting up. The chaplain was reviewing his notes. I walked to plot 9 to do a final check. The flowers were there, not placed on the ground. Growing, white roses and lilies, growing wild, in a cluster at the exact spot where I'd left the bouquet 3 days before. Full blooms, fresh, like they'd been there for weeks. but the ground around them was undisturbed. No planting holes, no mulch, just flowers growing directly from the grass, and they were already wilting, turning brown at the edges, petals curling, like they were dying in accelerated time. I checked the roots. They were in the soil, deep, established. The flowers had grown there, actually grown, in 3 days, on the exact spot where a woman was about to be buried. The hearse arrived at the gravesite. We prepared for the interment. I didn't mention the flowers, didn't point them out, just supervised the burial as planned. When we lowered the casket, the flowers were directly beneath. The crew had to cut them away to position the casket properly. I watched them remove the stems. The roots went deep, much deeper than they should for 3-day growth. The crew had to dig to get them all out. We completed the burial, filled the grave, placed the temporary county marker, standard service. Nothing unusual except the flowers. The next week, I got another delivery. Same florist, same arrangement. White roses and lilies, addressed to Plot God's Acre, Unmarked 12. Same card. See you soon, beloved. Unmarked 12 wasn't scheduled, wasn't dug. 3 plots away from the last burial, I called the florist again. Same story. Online order, paid in full, specific plot location. I took the flowers to the location, placed them on the ground, marked it in my log. 2 days later, we received notification of an indigent death. Female, early 70s, unidentified, assigned to Unmarked 12. The flowers were growing when I checked the plot the next morning, already wilting, roots deep in the soil. It happened again with Unmarked 14, then Unmarked 16, then Unmarked 19. Every time, the same pattern. Flowers delivered days before notification of death. Always white roses and lilies. Always addressed to the specific plot number. Always with the same card. See you soon, beloved. And every time, the deceased was female, unidentified, county case, always assigned to the exact plot number on the delivery. I started tracking the pattern, documented every delivery, every death, every burial. Over 3 months, 12 bouquets arrived. 12 women were buried in the corresponding plots. The flowers always arrived 2 to 4 days before the death notification. Always grew roots before the burial. Always wilted brown during the service. I tried to trace the online orders. The florist gave me what information they had. The orders came from an anonymous email account, paid through an untraceable prepaid card. No way to identify who was sending them, but I noticed something in the plot numbers. They weren't sequential. The flowers arrived for 9, 12, 14, 16, 19, 22, 26, 29, 33, 37, 41, 46. I plotted them on the cemetery map. The marked plots formed a pattern, a curve, like someone was selecting specific locations in a deliberate arrangement. I overlaid the pattern on the historical maps, found something. The curved line of plots matched the old property boundary from 1897, the original cemetery border. Before expansion, the flowers were marking the old perimeter. I researched the cemetery history, found records of the original burials. The cemetery had been farmland before 1897. The farmer's wife was buried there in 1896, a year before the cemetery opened. Her grave became part of the cemetery grounds. Her name was Beloved. Beloved Patterson died 1896, buried on her own property. No marker left after the cemetery expansion. The flowers weren't predicting deaths. They were marking the boundary of her original land, the property she was buried on, the ground she considered hers. I found her grave last week. Unmarked plot in the old section. Records showed she was buried northwest of the current God's Acre area. I checked the location. Fresh flowers, white roses and lilies, growing wild. No one had placed them. They were just there, roots deep in the soil where beloved Patterson had been buried for over a century. And on her grave, among the flowers, was a card, weathered, old, but readable. See you soon, beloved. Same handwriting, same card, but this one was dated 1896. I don't know who's sending the flowers. I don't know how they know which women will die, or which plots they'll be assigned to. I don't know why it's always women, always unidentified, always buried along the old property line. But I know the flowers keep coming. Last night, another delivery arrived. Plot God's Acre, Unmarked 51. We haven't received notification of a death yet, but I know we will. I placed the flowers this morning. They're already growing, already wilting, already waiting for someone who hasn't died yet. Someone beloved is expecting. Every Monday morning, I find pairs of shoes lined up outside the unmarked section. Children's shoes, work boots, heels, all worn but clean. And when I check the graves, every person buried there was found barefoot. My name is Sienna Cross, and I have worked as a Potter's Field maintenance worker at Memorial Gardens in Portland, Maine for 8 years. I maintain the indigent burial section, keep the grounds clean, document the unmarked graves. The work is solitary, quiet. Most people never visit Potter's Field. There are no families, no mourners, just me and the dead. The shoes started appearing last September. I arrived for my Monday shift at 7 a.m., unlocked the maintenance shed, grabbed my tools, walked toward the unmarked section to check for any ground settling from the weekend. The shoes were lined up along the path, 6 pairs, arranged neatly, side by side, toes pointing toward the graves, children's sneakers, men's work boots, women's flats, all different styles, different sizes, all worn but clean. No mud, no damage, just used shoes placed with care. I checked the area. No footprints, no signs anyone had been there. The cemetery gates had been locked all weekend. Security footage showed no vehicles, no visitors. But the shoes were there. I collected them, put them in a lost and found box in the shed. Figured maybe someone had left them as an offering. Some people do strange things with grief. The next Monday, they were back. 7 pairs this time. Same arrangement, lined up along the path to the unmarked section. Different shoes than before. Work boots, high heels, children's sandals, clean, worn, carefully placed. I checked the security footage. Nothing. No one entered the cemetery after closing on Sunday, but Monday morning, the shoes appeared. I started documenting them, took photos, logged the types, the sizes, the conditions. Every Monday, more shoes. 8 pairs, 10 pairs, 12, always arranged the same way, always clean, always worn. I showed the director. He looked at the photos and shrugged. Probably some kind of memorial tradition. People do odd things. Just remove them, keep the area clear. But I was curious. I started matching the shoes to the graves. The unmarked section has 37 burials, all indigent cases from the past 5 years, all county assigned, most of them unidentified. I have access to the basic records: date of burial, case number, approximate age, and gender. Nothing detailed. I requested the full case files from the county. Wanted to see if there was any connection to the shoes. Took 2 weeks to get the records. When they arrived, I found something. Every person buried in the unmarked section had been found barefoot. Not most of them. All of them. 37 burials. 37 people who died without shoes, found in shelters, alleys, parks, abandoned buildings, all of them barefoot when they were discovered. I counted the shoes that had appeared over the weeks, 37 pairs, exactly the number of burials in the section. I checked the details, the shoe sizes, the styles, cross-referenced them with the case files, found matches. The children's sneakers, size 3, matched a girl, age 7, found deceased in a condemned apartment. Case file noted she was barefoot. Cause of death: exposure. The work boots, size 10, matched a man, age 42, found in a park. Barefoot. Cause of death: hypothermia. The heels, size 8, matched a woman, age 35, found near a shelter. Barefoot. Cause of death: overdose. Every pair of shoes matched a buried person, matched their approximate size, matched their age and gender, matched what they might have worn in life. But these people had died barefoot, had been buried without shoes. The county doesn't provide them for indigent burials. Just a simple casket and a basic service. Someone was bringing their shoes. Every Monday, placing them along the path to their graves. I started arriving earlier. 6 a.m., 5:30, trying to catch whoever was leaving them. But every time, the shoes were already there when I arrived, arranged perfectly. No one visible, no cars in the parking lot, no footprints except mine. I set up a camera, aimed it at the unmarked section, recorded all weekend, reviewed the footage Monday morning. The shoes appeared at 4:53 a.m. Sunday night. Not delivered, not placed. They just appeared. One frame they weren't there. Next frame they were. All 37 pairs, lined up perfectly. I watched the footage again, slowed it down, frame by frame. Nothing. The shoes just appeared between frames, like they materialized. I stopped removing them, just left them there, watched to see what would happen. They stayed for exactly 1 week. Then, the following Sunday night at 4:53 a.m., they disappeared. Same way they'd arrived. One frame present, next frame gone. Monday morning, new shoes appeared, different pairs, different styles, but the same count, 37 pairs. I started taking samples, one shoe from a pair, brought it to my shed, tested it for evidence. The shoe was real, worn leather, aged rubber, actual use patterns, not new, not symbolic, real shoes that real people had worn. I traced one pair, expensive running shoes, barely worn, found a brand label inside. New Balance, size 9. I cross referenced with the case files. Matched to a teenage boy, age 16, found deceased in an underpass. Barefoot. Cause of death, exposure. I searched online for missing persons reports. Found him. Daniel Reyes. Reported missing 3 weeks before his death. The missing persons report included a photo. He was wearing the same New Balance running shoes I'd found at the grave. He'd died without them, been buried without them. But every Monday, they appeared at his unmarked plot. I found more matches. A woman's boots matched a missing persons case from 6 months before her death. A child's light up sneakers matched a runaway report from a year before burial. Work boots matched a man who'd been reported missing from his job site. All of them had been wearing these exact shoes when they disappeared. All of them had been found dead later, barefoot. All of them were buried in the unmarked section, and every week their shoes came back. Last Monday, I arrived at 5 a.m., earlier than usual. The shoes were already arranged, but this time something was different. They were warm. I touched a pair of work boots. The leather was warm, body temperature, like someone had just taken them off. I checked another pair, warm. All 37 pairs were warm, still holding heat. I looked at the graves. The ground around them was disturbed, not dug up, not vandalized, just disturbed, like someone had been standing there. 37 someones standing at their own graves, wearing their shoes, then taking them off, leaving them on the path, walking away barefoot. I checked the ground beyond the shoe line, found impressions in the dew, footprints, barefoot, 37 sets, leading away from the graves, leading toward the cemetery gates. I followed them. The prints went all the way to the fence line, then stopped. Like whoever made them had walked through the fence or disappeared. I reported it to the director, showed him the photos, the case files, the matches. He listened, then told me to stop investigating. It's a memorial, he said. Someone who cares. Let it be. But I can't let it be, because this Monday there were 38 pairs of shoes. I checked the burial records. Still 37 graves in the unmarked section. No new burials scheduled, but someone added a pair. Size 7 women's sneakers. Nike. Well worn, clean. I don't recognize them. Don't have a case file to match them to. Don't know who they belong to. But they're there, waiting, lined up with the others. And I'm afraid I'll find out soon whose grave they're marking. I heard my full name called from a half-filled grave during a county burial, and when I checked the list of the deceased, one of them shared my exact name. Died, Phaeton, 3 days ago with no known family, and the voice sounded exactly like my own. My name is Abel Frost, and I have worked as a gravedigger at Oakwood Cemetery in Buffalo, New York for 14 years. I dig graves, fill graves, maintain the grounds. The work is physical, repetitive, solitary. I know the sound of my own voice. I know when someone calls my name, but I've never heard myself calling from underground. It happened on a Tuesday morning in November. County burial, 4 indigent cases being interred in a shared plot in Section 8. Multiple burials in one grave are standard for Potter's Field. Saves space, saves cost. We dig deep, place the caskets at different levels, fill between them. I was operating the excavator, digging the grave to 12 feet. The first two caskets would go at the bottom, the next two at 8 feet. Standard configuration. I'd done it hundreds of times. At 9 feet down, I heard my name. Abel Frost. Clear, distinct, male voice, coming from the bottom of the grave. I killed the engine. Silence. Just wind through the bare trees and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. I waited, listened, nothing. I climbed down from the excavator, walked to the edge of the grave, looked into the hole, empty dirt walls, clay and rocks, no one there. Abel Frost. The voice came from below, from the bottom of the grave, speaking my full name, my exact name, not just Abel, both names, first and last. I backed away from the edge, looked around. The cemetery was empty. Just me, the excavator, the open grave, no one else in sight. I called my supervisor, told him I'd heard something in the grave. He came out, looked into the hole, heard nothing, told me to finish the excavation. I got back on the excavator, started digging again, reached 12 feet. The grave was ready. I shut down the machine, climbed out. Abel Frost, same voice, same cadence, coming from the open grave. I walked to the edge again. The voice was louder now, clearer, like whoever was speaking was right at the bottom, looking up at me. I recognized the voice. It was mine, not similar, not close, exactly mine. The same pitch, the same tone, the same slight rasp I have from years of smoking. My voice, speaking my name, from 12 feet underground. I ran the burial records check while waiting for the caskets to arrive. Standard procedure: verify the deceased, confirm plot assignment, match paperwork, 4 county cases scheduled for the grave, 3 males, 1 female, ages ranging from 45 to 72, all indigent, all unclaimed. I scanned the names on the list. The third name stopped me. Abel Frost, male, age 47, found deceased in a shelter 3 days ago. No next of kin, no known family. County case number 8743. My name, my exact name, first and last. But not me, someone else. Someone who died 3 days ago, someone being buried in the grave I'd just dug. I checked my driver's license. Abel Frost, age 47. I'd turned 47 in September, the same age as the deceased. I called the county morgue, asked about case 874-3. They pulled the file, confirmed the details. Abel Frost, male, Caucasian, approximately 5'10", 170 pounds, found deceased in a downtown shelter. Cause of death, cardiac arrest, no identification on the body, identified through fingerprints in a police database from an old vagrancy arrest. They sent me a photo from the morgue intake, standard documentation photo, face, profile. I was looking at myself, not someone who looked like me, not a distant resemblance. Me, same face, same features, same scar on my left cheek from a childhood accident, same crooked nose from a break that never healed right, same everything. The photo was dated 3 days ago, the day the man died, but I was alive, working. I'd been at the cemetery that day. My supervisor could confirm. Security footage would show me. I showed the photo to my supervisor. He looked at it, looked at me, frowned. That's strange, he said. Guy looks just like you. Same name, too. Weird coincidence. But it wasn't a coincidence. It was me. Exactly me, down to details no one should share. The scar, the crooked nose, the specific pattern of gray in my hair. The funeral home arrived with the caskets. 4 plain pine boxes. County burials. No service, just interment. They unloaded them, set up the lowering device, started with the bottom level. First casket down, second casket down, both at 12 feet. Filled dirt between them. Standard procedure. Third casket was Abel Frost. My name, my face, my body in a box. They positioned it on the lowering device. Started cranking it down. 8 feet depth, halfway into the grave. Abel Frost. The voice came from the casket, from inside the casket, speaking through the cheap pine. My voice, calling my name. The funeral home crew didn't hear it, just kept lowering. 7 feet, 6 feet, 5 feet. The casket descended into the grave. Abel Frost, Abel Frost, Abel Frost. Over and over, my voice, getting louder as the casket went deeper, like whoever was inside was waking up, realizing where they were, calling for help, calling for me. The casket reached 8 feet. The crew locked the lowering device, released the straps, left the casket suspended in the grave, started positioning the 4th casket above it. I walked to the edge, looked down. The 3rd casket, Abel Frost's casket, was directly below me. Pine lid, county seal, case number stenciled on the side. Abel Frost. The voice was calm now, not panicked, not scared, just speaking, like having a conversation, like talking to myself. Abel Frost. I'm here. I'm waiting. I couldn't do it. Couldn't stay for the rest of the burial. I told my supervisor I was sick, left the cemetery, went home, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, about the man with my name, my face, my voice, buried in a grave I dug, calling to me from the darkness. I checked the old vagrancy arrest that had provided the fingerprints, found the record, Abel Frost, arrested in Buffalo in 2003 for trespassing. No prior arrests, no subsequent arrests. Just that one record. I was arrested for trespassing in Buffalo in 2003. Same charge, same date, same location. It was my arrest record, but the fingerprints belonged to the dead man, the man in the grave, the man with my face. I drove to the cemetery that night, parked outside, walked to Section 8. The grave had been filled, the 4th casket buried at 4 feet, soil tamped, temporary markers placed, standard county burial complete. I stood at the edge of the filled grave, listened, silence. Then, faint, muffled by 12 feet of earth, my voice. Abel Frost, I'm here. I'm waiting. I go back every night now, stand at the grave, listen to myself calling from below, my voice, my name, my face buried in the darkness, and I wonder what happens when whatever's down there stops waiting, when it decides to come up, when it decides it's time to take my place. Because last night, the voice changed. It wasn't calling anymore, it was answering. I'd said out loud, "What do you want?" And from 12 feet down, through the soil and the caskets and the darkness, my voice replied, "I want to be you again. I don't go to work anymore, can't dig graves, can't be near that section. but I still hear the voice. At home, in my car, walking down the street. Abel Frost, I'm coming, getting closer, getting louder, getting ready. I filed death certificates for Potter's Field burials, and over 2 years I found 11 certificates listing full names, dates of birth, and next of kin, but all were buried as unknown, with no identification, and when I contacted the families, they said their loved ones were alive, yet the graves are not empty. My name is Darnell Watts, and I have worked as a registry clerk at County Services in Memphis, Tennessee for 26 years. I process death certificates, burial permits, cremation authorizations. I maintain records, verify documentation, ensure everything matches. Names, dates, identification. Everything must align before a burial can proceed. The discrepancies started appearing in my files 2 years ago. A death certificate came across my desk. Standard County case. Unidentified male found deceased in an abandoned building, but the certificate had a name, Marcus William Hayes, date of birth June 14th, 1972. Next of kin, Elizabeth Hayes, mother. Address in Memphis. I checked the burial authorization. Listed as unknown male. No identification. No next of kin. Potter's Field burial. The forms contradicted each other. The death certificate said we knew who he was. The burial permit said we didn't. I flagged it. Called the medical examiner's office. They checked their records, said the body had been unidentified, no wallet, no phone, no identifying marks. They'd listed it as unknown male in their system, but someone had filed a death certificate with a full name. I checked the signature on the certificate. It was mine, my handwriting, my official stamp. But I hadn't filed it. I would have remembered processing a named death certificate for someone buried as unknown. I searched my records, found no copy, no original paperwork, no indication I'd ever filed a certificate for Marcus William Hayes, but the county database showed it existed, filed 2 months ago, signed by me. I looked up Elizabeth Hayes, found a phone number, called her. Hello? Ms. Hayes, this is Darnell Watts from County Services. I'm calling about Marcus William Hayes. I have a death certificate on file. My son Marcus is fine. He's right here. Silence. I checked the date on the certificate. Marcus had allegedly died 2 months ago. Ma'am, I have documentation showing my son is alive. He's sitting in the kitchen. Would you like to speak to him? She put him on the phone. Male voice. Young. Alive. Marcus William Hayes. Born June 14th, 1972. Same person listed on the death certificate I was holding. I apologized. Told her there must be a clerical error. Hung up. But the certificate was real. The burial was real. Someone named Marcus William Hayes was in the ground at Potter's Field. Buried 2 months ago as unknown male. I checked the grave, drove to the cemetery, found the plot, temporary marker, unknown male, County Case 6329. I requested an exhumation order. Took 3 weeks to process. They finally approved it based on the documentation discrepancy. We exhumed the grave. The casket contained a body, male, approximate age early 50s, advanced decomposition, no identification, But the dental records didn't match Marcus William Hayes, didn't match anyone in the missing persons database. Someone else, someone unknown, buried in a grave assigned to a man who was still alive. I filed it as a clerical error, updated the records, reburied the body, moved on. Then I found another one. Death certificate for Jennifer Ann Morris. Date of birth, March 2nd, 1905. Next of kin, Robert Morris. Father, filed 3 months ago. Signed by me, burial authorization. Unknown female, Potter's Field. I called Robert Morris. His daughter, Jennifer, was alive, living in Nashville, working as a nurse, had been alive for the entire 3 months since the death certificate was filed. I found 9 more over the next year, all the same pattern. Death certificates with full names, dates of birth, next of kin, all filed by me, all signed with my handwriting, all for people buried as unknown in Potter's Field, all for people who were still alive when I contacted their families. I kept a list, documented everything, tried to find the pattern. Marcus William Hayes, certificate filed February, still alive. Jennifer Ann Morris, certificate filed January, still alive. David Lee Thompson, certificate filed March, still alive. Sarah Elizabeth Winters, certificate filed April, still alive. 11 certificates total. 11 people with full identification buried as unknown. 11 families who confirmed their loved ones were alive. I started checking the graves. Every single one contained a body. Every exhumation showed remains. But none of the dental records matched the names on the death certificates. The graves weren't empty. They just didn't contain who the certificates said they did. Then people started dying. Marcus William Hayes, found deceased in his apartment, June 9th, heart attack. His mother called me, said it was impossible. He'd been healthy, had just seen a doctor. The medical examiner confirmed cardiac arrest. Natural causes. I checked the death certificate I'd filed 2 months before he actually died. Same cause of death, cardiac arrest. Same date of discovery, June 9th, but filed in February, 4 months before it happened. Jennifer Ann Morris, car accident, September 3rd, killed instantly. Her father called me in shock, said she'd been driving home from work, lost control, hit a barrier. I checked the death certificate filed in January. Cause of death, traumatic injury. Date of death, September 3rd, filed 8 months before she died. They were all dying, all 11 people, dying on the exact dates listed on the certificates I'd somehow filed before their deaths. I contacted the medical examiner, showed them the documentation, the death certificates filed months in advance. The burial permits listing them as unknown. The families confirming they'd been alive. They investigated, found nothing irregular. The deaths were natural. Accidents, medical events, nothing suspicious, just coincidence that 11 people happened to die on dates I'd predicted months earlier. But I hadn't predicted anything. I hadn't filed those certificates. Someone had, someone using my name, my handwriting, my official stamp. I checked my office logs, found entries for the dates those certificates were filed, showed I'd been at work, normal hours, normal duties, but I had no memory of filing them. I started locking my stamp in a safe, keeping my files secured, monitoring every document I signed. But last week, another certificate appeared, dated, signed, filed, my handwriting, my stamp, full name, Darnell Marcus Watts, date of birth April 27th, 1971. Next of kin, Angela Watts, wife, my name, my birth date, my wife, cause of death, cardiac arrest, date of death, January 9th, 2026. 5 days from now, I showed Angela. She held the certificate, read it, started crying, asked me what it meant. I don't know what it means, but I checked the burial authorization. It's already filed. Potter's Field, listed as unknown male. No identification, no next of kin, just a grave assignment. Plot God's Acre, unmarked 67. I drove to the cemetery, found the plot. It's already dug, 6 feet deep, waiting, temporary marker already placed. Unknown male, county case 9611. My case number, my grave, my death certificate, filed 6 months ago by someone using my name. I went to the doctor, full physical, EKG, stress test, everything. They said I'm healthy, no heart problems, no risk factors, no reason to expect cardiac arrest. But the certificate says January 9th, cardiac arrest. Buried as unknown in Plot 67. I tried to cancel the burial authorization, void the paperwork, but the system won't let me. Says the documents have already been processed. Final, binding, it's January 4th today. 5 days left. I keep checking the other graves. The 11 people I filed certificates for before they died, all of them buried as unknown, all of them in Potter's Field, all of them dead on the exact dates I predicted. Angela wants me to leave, go to another state, run, hide, get away from Memphis, away from the cemetery, away from the grave with my name on it. But I don't think distance matters, because this morning I found my own missing persons report, filed yesterday, reported by Angela, says I disappeared on January 9th. Haven't been seen since. No leads, no trace. Filed 4 days before it happens, signed with her handwriting. The same way I filed death certificates for 11 people before they died. The same way someone filed mine 6 months ago. I'm going to work today, going to process papers, going to sign documents, going to file certificates, and I'm going to wait. 5 days until January 9th. 5 days until I become unknown. 5 days until someone else files paperwork with my name on it. And I wonder if they'll realize what they've done, or if they'll just keep filing, keep signing, keep filling graves with people who don't know they're already dead.